Children, come closer. Yes, sit right here in front of me. Tonight, I want to tell you something I have never told anyone. A story so old, so heavy, and so frightening that it has lived inside my bones for decades. I kept it buried, locked away, hoping no one would ever have to hear it. But you are my blood, my little ones, and maybe it's time you knew the truth that changed my life forever. Are you scared already? Good. You should be, because nothing in this story is made up. It happened. It happened to me. Let me take you back to the night that stole my sleep for years. I was not young like you children when it happened. I was a grown woman, newly married, full of life, full of dreams. Your grandfather and I lived in a quiet old village far from the noise you know today. It was peaceful, yes, but it was also hiding something. Something the villagers never spoke about aloud. Something whispered only in the darkest corners. At night, that village changed. The silence there wasn't normal silence. It was the kind that presses on your chest, the kind that makes you hear your heartbeat inside your ears. Even the dogs didn't bark after sunset, and the winds avoided the houses as though something in the dark frightened even them. That was where it began. But before I tell you about that night, you must picture the house. You must see it exactly as it was, because every shadow, every crack, and every inch of that old place mattered. Our house was long and narrow, built of old wood that groaned even when no one touched it. The floors creaked as if footsteps from another world were walking alongside yours. The windows rattled even without wind, and the walls always felt cold, as if the house hated warmth. But the strangest thing about it was the back hallway, a long, thin corridor that led to the last room, a storage room we never used. The door to that room was always locked, and the villagers told us something lived there long before we arrived. Your grandfather had laughed, of course. He always believed everything had a practical explanation. But I didn't, because even during the daytime that hallway felt wrong. The air was heavier there, colder, as if someone was standing just out of sight, breathing quietly, waiting for someone to walk too far in. And at night we never walked near it. You see, that house had a rule. Not a written rule, not a spoken one, but a rule the house itself made. Never step into the back hallway after midnight. Never. I don't know how I knew. I just did. But one night, I broke that rule. It was a stormy night, I remember it clearly. The sky was black as ink, and the thunder shook the ground like an angry spirit pounding its fists against the earth. Rain slapped against the windows like hundreds of hands trying to get in. Your grandfather was away that night, visiting a friend in a nearby town. I was alone, and that was when it began. I was sitting near the fireplace trying to sew, when I heard it. A knock, not from the front door, not from any door, but from deep inside the house. 3 slow knocks. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. My needle slipped from my fingers. The sound had come from the back hallway. For a long moment I stayed completely still, listening, waiting, hoping it was just the house settling, the storm pushing against the walls. But then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. Children, there are knocks in life that feel ordinary. These were not ordinary. These knocks felt deliberate, like someone, or something, was knocking because it wanted me to come closer. My heart began to beat too loudly. The fire behind me crackled, but even its warmth felt weak. I stood up slowly. I should have stayed where I was. I know that now. But curiosity, it is a dangerous thing, especially in old houses where old things sleep. I walked toward the hallway. Every step I took, the floor groaned as if warning me to turn back. The house was darker than usual, as though the storm had swallowed all the moonlight. The hallway ahead of me was pitch black. I couldn't see anything beyond the first few steps. And then, the knocking changed. This time it wasn't gentle. Bang! 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 So loud the walls shook. It came from the locked storage room at the very end. I should have run. I should have screamed. I should have left the house. But something else happened. I heard a voice. A whisper, faint but clear. A woman's voice, calling my name. Not shouting, not crying, just whispering. As if she was standing behind the locked door. I felt my entire body go cold. I had never heard that voice before. And yet, I felt like it knew me. It whispered again. Softer, more urgent, closer. I could not breathe. I reached the beginning of the hallway. My hand touched the wall. It was freezing cold, colder than winter ice. And then, something moved in the darkness. Not a person, not an animal, a shape. Tall, thin, wrong. It shifted as if made of shadow, not flesh. I stumbled back, but my feet wouldn't obey me. It was like the darkness was pulling me in. The house didn't want me to escape. The whisper turned into a rasp, then a growl, then silence. Complete silence. And in that silence, the shape took one slow step toward me. Only one. But that was enough. I ran. I didn't look back. I don't remember breathing until I reached my bedroom and slammed the door shut. All night I sat awake on the floor, staring at the door, waiting for the shape to follow me. It didn't. But it also didn't leave. Because from that night on, I knew something was living in that hallway, and it wasn't human. That night felt endless. I sat on the cold wooden floor of my bedroom, back pressed against the wall, listening to every sound the house made. The storm outside raged on, but even the thunder felt safer than the silence of that hallway. Every time the lightning flashed through the window, I expected to see that shadow standing right outside my door. Waiting. But it never came. It never needed to. Because once something dark sees you, once it calls your name, it doesn't forget you. Morning took too long to arrive. When the first gray light crept into the room, I felt my muscles finally loosen. My legs were stiff, my fingers numb from gripping the edge of the bed all night. I didn't open the bedroom door immediately. I listened first. Silence. No knocking. No whisper. No movement. But silence in that house was never comforting. I slowly pushed open the door and peeked out. The hallway looked normal again, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. The air still felt wrong. Heavy. Thick. As though something unseen had passed through it recently. I forced myself to walk to the kitchen. I needed water, food, something normal to touch, something to remind me that the world outside that hallway still existed. But the moment I stepped into the kitchen, I knew the darkness had followed me, because all the cabinet doors were open. Every single one, wide open, like mouths frozen in silent screams. I remember whispering to myself, "The wind. Maybe the wind did this." But I knew it hadn't. The cabinets had wooden latches. They didn't open easily. Someone had opened them, Or something. I closed every cabinet with shaking hands, forcing myself to stay calm. I kept telling myself that your grandfather would be home soon. I just had to make it through the morning. But the house had a different plan. After cleaning the kitchen, I walked back into the hallway. Not the back hallway, just the main one. And that was when I noticed something strange. Something small. Something on the floor. A perfect line of dust. As if something had been dragged across the floorboards. Coming from the back hallway and stopping exactly where I'd stood the night before. Children, do you understand what that means? Whatever I saw, it had come right up to me. Closer than I realized. And that wasn't the worst part. At the end of the dust line, right at my feet, there was a footprint. Not a human one. Not an animal's. It was long. Too long. And thin. Almost like the shape of a hand. But twisted, bent, stretched, unnaturally. I felt the world tilt, my stomach turning to ice. I couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, get out, leave the house, and never return. But I was frozen. Then I heard the front door open. I gasped and spun around. It was your grandfather. He walked in with a cheerful voice, brushing rain off his coat. I ran to him, hugging him so tightly that I think I frightened him. He laughed and said, "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." If only it were just a ghost. I tried to explain what had happened. The knocking, the whisper, the shadow, the footprint. But the more I spoke, the more he frowned. He listened, yes, but not the way I needed him to. When I finished, he held my shoulders gently and said, "You were alone in a storm, love. Fear plays tricks on the mind." I wanted to believe him. Truly, I did. But fear doesn't leave footprints. Still, I didn't argue. I was too exhausted, too shaken. Your grandfather walked toward the back hallway, determined to prove that nothing was there. I begged him not to open the storage room door. But when he tried the handle, it was unlocked. It had been locked for years. The previous owners told us it must never be opened. Your grandfather himself had checked it a dozen times. But now, it opened as easily as any other door. He stepped inside, and I felt my heart stop. The room was empty. Completely empty. No boxes, no furniture. Nothing. Only 4 walls, dust, and a strange, lingering chill. Your grandfather turned to me and smiled. "You see? Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. I felt it. The room felt like a trap. Like something had been living inside the walls. Not on the floor. I stepped back. I told him to close it. Lock it again. Never open it. He didn't argue. Maybe he felt it too, even if he wouldn't admit it. He shut the door, but the lock, it wouldn't latch anymore. The metal had bent, twisted from the inside, as if something had forced its way out. That night, he stayed awake with me near the fireplace. He tried to distract me, telling stories, holding my hand. But even he grew quiet as the evening grew darker. Because we both felt it. The house wasn't empty. Something was awake. Something was listening. Something wanted us to know it was there. And just when the clock struck midnight, the knocking returned. But this time, it didn't come from the hallway. It came from inside the walls. 3 slow knocks. Tap, tap, tap. Children. Imagine hearing something knocking from right behind you, From inside the very wall your back is touching. Your grandfather and I froze. The fire flickered. The entire room felt colder. The knocking came again. Tap, tap, tap. And then... the whisper returned. My name. Not desperate, not angry. Playful. Like something had found a new game. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. But the whisper didn't stop. It grew louder. Closer. And then... something scraped across the inside of the wall. Long, dragging, sharp, like fingers made of bone. The sound traveled around the room, crawling through the walls like an insect searching for a way in. We sat in silence, gripping each other's hands until the first hint of dawn finally arrived. When the whisper faded, the wall went silent. But children, things that hide inside walls do not leave. They wait. And that was just the beginning. The morning after those knocks came from inside the walls, the house felt different. Not just eerie. No, something far worse. It felt aware, as though it had woken up completely, as though it was watching us with eyes we couldn't see. Your grandfather tried to act normal. He made breakfast, opened the windows, tried to bring light into the house, but even he kept glancing at the walls. Listening, waiting. Every sound made us jump. And children. Old houses have many sounds. At one point, the wooden beams above us creaked loudly, the kind of long, low groan that seemed to travel across the ceiling. Your grandfather froze mid-step, then forced a laugh. But his eyes showed fear. He finally believed something was wrong. We decided to leave the house for the day. We went to the village, to the small market, the bakery, anywhere that wasn't home. I felt lighter the moment we stepped outside. The air was warmer. The sun actually reached my skin. For the first time in days, I could breathe. But even as we walked through the village, I felt eyes on me. The villagers stared strangely, not with curiosity, but with something like pity. An old woman finally came up to us. Her back was bent, her hands wrinkled, and her eyes clouded with age. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and whispered, "You heard it, didn't you?" My throat dried. Your grandfather started to speak, but the old woman held up her hand. I told them. I told the people who sold you that house. That thing inside those walls never rests. I asked her what she meant, but she shook her head. It's older than the village, she whispered. Older than the land, and once it takes notice of you, it follows. Her voice cracked on the last word. Leave before it learns your name fully. A shiver crawled up my spine. But before I could ask anything else, her son rushed over and pulled her away, apologizing, saying she'd talked nonsense. He looked terrified. Not of her, but of what she had said. That fear told me everything, as if something had forced its way out. That night he stayed awake with me near the fireplace. He tried to distract me, telling stories, holding my hand. But even he grew quiet as the evening grew darker. Because we both felt it. The house wasn't empty. Something was awake. Something was listening. Something wanted us to know it was there. And just when the clock struck midnight, the knocking returned. But this time, it didn't come from the hallway. It came from inside the walls. 3 slow knocks. Tap. 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 Children, imagine hearing something knocking from right behind you. From inside the very wall. Your back is touching. Your grandfather and I froze. The fire flickered. The entire room felt colder. The knocking came again. Tap, 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 and then the whisper returned. My name. Not desperate, not angry, playful. Like something had found a new game. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. But the whisper didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, and then something scraped across the inside of the wall. Long, dragging, sharp, like fingers made of bone. The sound traveled around the room, crawling through the walls like an insect searching for a way in. We sat in silence, gripping each other's hands until the first hint of dawn finally arrived. When the whisper faded, the wall went silent. But children, things that hide inside walls do not leave. They wait. And that was just the beginning. The morning after those knocks came from inside the walls, the house felt different. Not just eerie. No, something far worse. It felt aware, as though it had woken up completely, as though it was watching us with eyes we couldn't see. Your grandfather tried to act normal. He made breakfast, opened the windows, tried to bring light into the house. But even he kept glancing at the walls, listening, waiting. Every sound made us jump. And children. Old houses have many sounds. At one point, the wooden beams above us creaked loudly, the kind of long, low groan that seemed to travel across the ceiling. Your grandfather froze mid-step, then forced a laugh. But his eyes showed fear. He finally believed something was wrong. We decided to leave the house for the day. We went to the village, to the small market, the bakery, anywhere that wasn't home. I felt lighter the moment we stepped outside. The air was warmer. The sun actually reached my skin. For the first time in days, I could breathe. But even as we walked through the village, I felt eyes on me. The villagers stared strangely. Not with curiosity, but with something like pity. An old woman finally came up to us. Her back was bent, her hands wrinkled, and her eyes clouded with age. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and whispered, "You heard it, didn't you?" My throat dried. Your grandfather started to speak, but the old woman held up her hand. I told them. I told the people who sold you that house. That thing inside those walls never rests. I asked her what she meant, but she shook her head. It's older than the village, she whispered. Older than the land, and once it takes notice of you, it follows. Her voice cracked on the last word. Leave before it learns your name fully. A shiver crawled up my spine. But before I could ask anything else, her son rushed over and pulled her away, apologizing, saying she talked nonsense. He looked terrified, not of her, but of what she had said. That fear told me everything. People in that village knew. They were just too frightened to speak. We returned home before sunset, hoping daylight would keep the house calm. But the moment we stepped inside, everything felt wrong again. The smell hit us first. A strong, cold, earthy smell, like wet soil mixed with something rotten. It seeped through the hallway, thick and heavy. Your grandfather checked the floors, thinking maybe an animal had gotten inside. But nothing was there. The smell was coming from the walls. He pressed his hand against the wallpaper and jerked it back instantly. It was damp, as if something wet was soaking through from the inside. He looked at me, and I could see the truth in his eyes. He finally understood. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat near the fireplace again, wrapped in blankets, waiting. At around midnight, the smell grew stronger. So strong it felt like it was in our throats. And then the knocks returned. But this time, they didn't follow a pattern. They didn't come in sets of 3. They came in frantic, uneven bursts, racing around us inside the walls. Tap, 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 tap. Like something was running. Or searching. Your grandfather stood up, furious and terrified. He shouted at the walls, demanding it stop, demanding it leave us alone. But the knocking grew louder. Then it stopped abruptly. The silence afterward was worse. A heavy, suffocating silence. And in that silence, something new happened. Children, listen carefully. Because this was the moment we realized the thing inside the walls was not just knocking. It could reach. Your grandfather stood near the living room wall, breathing hard, his fist still raised from banging on it. And then something tapped back. But not lightly, not gently. It tapped right where his hand had been, as if mocking him. He stumbled backward, his face white as salt. I grabbed his arm, but before either of us could move, a whisper seeped through the wall. Not a woman's whisper this time, a man's, deep, broken, crawling like gravel sliding across stone. But it didn't say my name. It said his. Imagine something you cannot see, something not alive, whispering your name. From inside a wall, your grandfather's knees almost buckled. His lips trembled. The whisper came again. Longer. Closer. Then suddenly the wall bulged, as if something pressed against it from the inside. A shape. A palm. But stretched wrong. Too long. Dragging slowly downward. We backed away, step by step. The wall pulsed faintly, like something was breathing behind it. And then a long, jagged crack began spreading across the wallpaper. Thin at first, then wider, climbing upward like a black vein. Your grandfather grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the front door. But as we ran, the door slammed shut. By itself. The lock turned. By itself. We were trapped. Your grandfather pulled at the doorknob with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. I ran toward the back of the house, but before I could make it to the kitchen, the lights went out. Not flickered, not dimmed. Went out completely. Darkness swallowed us whole. I couldn't see him. I couldn't see anything. Then, a sound. Slow. Deliberate. Something dragging along the floorboards. Coming toward us through the dark. I felt the air shift. The cold thickened. The smell of rot grew stronger. So strong it made me gag. Your grandfather called my name. His voice shaking. I reached out in the dark, trying to find his hand, but I touched something else. Something cold. Wet, rough, and breathing. I screamed and jerked away. Your grandfather shouted, stumbling toward me. Then, just for a second, lightning flashed through the window. And in that split second of bluish light, I saw it. Children, I will never forget what I saw. A tall, crooked shape standing inches behind your grandfather. Its skin, if it was skin, looked stretched too tight, as if it didn't fit its bones. Its head bent unnaturally sideways, and its eyes... Oh, God. Its eyes were hollow black pits. Not empty. No, something moved inside them, crawling like worms in soil. In its long skeletal hand, it held something. A piece of the wallpaper, torn from the wall, with thin strands of wood attached, as though it had pulled it out like flesh. The lightning faded. Darkness returned. And then it whispered. My name, right behind my ear. We didn't think. We didn't breathe. We ran. We charged toward the door again, hitting it, slamming our shoulders into it. I screamed until my voice cracked. Your grandfather threw his whole weight against it. And then, as suddenly as it had locked, the door flew open. We stumbled out into the rain, falling into the mud. We didn't look back. Not once. We spent the night in a barn far away from the house, shivering, soaked, terrified. But the house, the thing in the walls, it wasn't done with us. Because when dawn came, we returned only to gather our belongings. But the house, it was waiting. And it had changed. When the morning finally came, children, your grandfather and I walked back toward the house with dread in our bones. We didn't want to return. Every step felt heavier than the last. But we had no choice. All our belongings were still inside. Our documents, our money, our clothes, everything. We prayed the creature had vanished with the night. But evil does not fade with sunlight. Sometimes daylight only reveals its true shape. When we reached the house, your grandfather stopped dead in his tracks. The front door was wide open. Wide. As if someone stood there waiting for us. The wooden door, which had slammed shut on its own last night, now hung slightly off its hinges. Deep scratches ran across its surface. Long, jagged marks carved into the wood. Not like knives, not like claws. No. They looked like fingers. Long, thin fingers dragged downward with immense force. Your grandfather whispered. It was inside all night. But he whispered too late. Deep down, I already knew. I stepped forward cautiously. The wind blew through the doorway, carrying that same cold, rotten smell from the night before. It wrapped around us like invisible smoke. As soon as I stepped into the living room, I knew the house wasn't just haunted. It was angry. Furniture had been overturned. Chairs lay broken. The dining table was flipped on its side. Our belongings, clothes, books, dishes, were scattered everywhere, as if thrown around by a storm. But the strangest thing, the most horrifying thing, was on the far wall. The wallpaper had been ripped off completely, and underneath, carved deep into the wooden boards, was my name. Not written, carved, deeply slashed into the wood, over and over. Children, imagine seeing your own name carved into a wall, done by something that does not have flesh or mercy. I felt my knees weaken. Your grandfather stood beside me, his hand trembling in mine. He whispered, "It wants you." I didn't deny it. We should have run out immediately. We should have left everything and never returned. But fear makes the mind slow, confused. We thought we could gather our things quickly and leave before the creature returned. We were wrong. We moved through the house carefully, avoiding the back hallway. Your grandfather collected documents while I packed whatever clothes I could find. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fold anything. And then it began again, the knocking. Soft at first, tap, 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 coming from the back hallway. Your grandfather and I froze. The knock came again, louder. Tap, tap, tap. It echoed through the entire house, vibrating through the floors. The hair on my arm stood up as if electricity ran through me. And then, thud. Something heavy slammed against the storage room door. Then another, and another. Something was trying to break out. Your grandfather shouted, "Leave everything! Run!" But it was too late. The door at the end of the hallway burst open. Wood splintered. Dust filled the air. Something dark spilled out from within. I grabbed your grandfather's arm, and we dashed toward the front door. But before we reached it, the house reacted again. The door slammed shut on its own. We were trapped a second time. The knocking turned into rapid pounding. The creature was coming. Your grandfather dragged me into the kitchen, slamming the door behind us. But the kitchen didn't feel any safer. It felt worse. Something dripped from the ceiling. Plip, plip, plip. Cold droplets hit my skin. When I looked up, children, there are moments in life that carve themselves into your soul so deeply that even time cannot erase them. Above me, on the ceiling, a face was staring down at us. Not a human face, not a ghost. It was stretched across the ceiling like wet cloth stuck to wood. Distorted, melting into the timber. The eyes nothing but hollow pits, the mouth open wide, in a silent scream. And the droplets falling onto us. They were coming from inside its mouth. Thick, black, rotten. Your grandfather grabbed my hand and yanked me toward the back door of the kitchen. He tried to open it, but the handle wouldn't turn. No matter how hard he pulled. Behind us, the face began to move. The ceiling creaked, groaned, then bulged downward, as though the creature was pushing through the wood, trying to drop down onto us. The wooden planks bent. Cracks spread. Dust rained down. Your grandfather threw his shoulder into the door. Once, twice. Finally, the lock snapped. The door flew open. We stumbled outside, gasping for air, running through the overgrown backyard toward the small dirt road leading out of the property. The sun was high, but the air felt cold against my skin. When we reached the edge of the property, I turned back. The house was silent, still, watching, and in the top window, the one facing the back, something stood behind the glass. Tall, crooked, head bent sideways. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It just watched us leave. That was the last time we set foot in that house. But the story doesn't end there, children. Oh no. Because fate is cruel. Even when you run, some things follow. We moved to another village miles away. A new house, new neighbors. We thought we had escaped. For a few weeks, everything was quiet. Normal. I tried to pretend the creature was gone. Your grandfather tried even harder. But one night, I woke up to a sound. A soft, almost gentle tapping. Not on the door, not on the window, but on the wall right beside my bed. 3 slow knocks. Tap. 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 I froze. Your grandfather stirred beside me. He heard it too. Then, slowly, the knocks traveled along the wall. Downward, toward the floor. Then to the next wall. Then the next. Moving around the room. Like something crawling inside the walls. Searching for a way in. And then, children, listen closely. From the darkness, a whisper came. My name. But this time, it was clearer, closer, more confident. The creature had followed us. It had learned my name fully. And once something like that learns your name, it never stops calling. And children... Grandma's voice tightened, low and trembling. When something that is not human begins calling your name, it is not calling you toward it. It is calling you away from everything else, away from safety, away from light, away from life itself. She took a deep breath, the lantern flame flickering as if reacting to her words. That night, after it whispered my name with such confidence, I felt the air shift, as if the darkness itself had leaned closer to me. I could feel a coldness on the back of my neck, the kind that doesn't come from a breeze, but from a presence. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't dare breathe too loudly. I simply stood there, frozen, listening to the silence, a silence that was waiting. Grandma clasped her hands slowly together. We moved through the house carefully, avoiding the back hallway. Your grandfather collected documents while I packed whatever clothes I could find. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fold anything. And then it began again. The knocking. Soft at first. Tap, 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 coming from the back hallway. Your grandfather and I froze. The knock came again. Louder. Tap, tap, tap. It echoed through the entire house, vibrating through the floors. The hair on my arms stood up as if electricity ran through me. And then, thud, something heavy slammed against the storage room door. Children, do you know what waiting silence means? It means something is watching you, deciding something about you. She reached out and tapped the wooden floor with her finger. And I felt a soft tap behind me, like a finger, or a claw, or something trying to test if I was real. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I ran. She smiled without warmth. I ran like the dead were behind me. Maybe they were. She lifted her gaze to the dark window. But running from things like that doesn't always help, because some beings don't chase you with their feet. They chase you with your memory. They slip into your shadow. They hide in the parts of your mind that you don't control. Grandma leaned closer. And that creature, the one that had learned my name, it didn't need to be seen. It didn't need to appear. It only needed to be known. She swallowed again, slower this time. For weeks after that, I would hear my name when I was alone. Never loud, never near others. Always when I was most vulnerable. Washing my face, combing my hair, closing my eyes to sleep. She raised a finger. Just a whisper, never more. Her voice was now almost trembling. But one night, it said something else. Grandma's expression hardened. It didn't just call my name. It didn't just whisper. It asked me something. She stared at the children, letting the silence stretch. It asked, "May I come in?" Grandma's breath shuddered. And children, when something unknown asks to come in, you must never answer. Not yes, not no, not anything. She shook her head. I learned that too late. The lantern crackled. Because the night I stayed silent, the night I gave it no answer at all, was the night I heard it step inside anyway. Grandma's eyes didn't blink as she continued, her voice soft and cold. It stepped inside, not through a door, not through a window, but through the quiet. She tapped her finger lightly on her knee. You see, children, silence is also a doorway, a very old one, older than houses, older than stories, older than fear itself. And that night, when I refused to answer it, my silence opened something I didn't understand. She leaned back in her chair. I remember lying in bed. The lamp was off, the room was dark, but not the kind of dark you know. This was a heavy darkness. It felt like a blanket made of shadows. I could hear the wind outside, but inside the room, everything was still. Her voice dropped. Too still. She exhaled slowly. That's when I heard the first step. Soft, like someone walking barefoot. But children, I lived alone. No one else should have been there. A pause. Another step, closer and closer. She traced a line on the table with her nail. I didn't move, not even a breath. But the steps kept coming, slow as if savoring each moment. And then, at the side of my bed, it stopped. A long silence. I felt something watching me, not from above, not from beside, but from inside the darkness, like eyes made of hunger itself. Grandma touched her chest lightly. My heartbeat became loud, loud enough that I feared it would give me away. And then she leaned forward. It whispered again, right beside my ear. So close. I felt the cold of its breath. Her voice mimicked the whisper. I'm inside. The children's breaths hitched, but Grandma continued. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But fear, real fear, doesn't let you move. It locks you inside your own skin. She clenched her hands. The whisper came again, smoother, more confident. I know your name. Now let me see your face. Grandma dragged her finger down her cheek, as if remembering the sensation. Children. That was the moment I knew I had to do something. Because if I opened my eyes, even by mistake, even a tiny bit, I would see something that no human mind should ever see. Something that would live inside me forever. The lantern flame dimmed. So I did the only thing I could. She inhaled sharply. I started praying. Her eyes glistened. But children, do you know what happens when something ancient hears a prayer? She leaned closer, voice trembling but steady. It mocks it. Her whisper lingered. Pray louder. I like the sound. Grandma shut her eyes tightly, and then it touched my arm. She opened her eyes suddenly, wide and dark, cold, long, and wrong. Not like a hand, not like anything you can imagine. Her tone collapsed to a near whisper. And children, that wasn't even the worst part. She swallowed. The worst part was, it spoke again. Grandma's voice changed, quieter, deeper. If you won't look at me, I will look at you. The room felt colder as she paused. And then, slowly, painfully, I felt it lifting my eyelid with something sharp. Grandma's voice thinned to a whisper, the lantern flame trembling with it. And children, when I felt it lifting my eyelid, even the smallest bit, I understood something terrible. She placed a hand over her heart. It didn't want my eyes. It wanted my fear. A brittle breath escaped her. Because fear feeds things like that. Gives them shape, strength, permission. Her eyes drifted toward the dark corner of the room, but only for a moment. So I did the bravest, or the most foolish, thing I have ever done. She straightened her back. I opened my eyes. Her fingers gripped her shawl tightly. But before you ask, no, I did not see its full form, And that is the only reason I'm still alive." She exhaled shakily. "Children, I saw only a shadow. A shape that did not make sense. A shape that changed, even as I looked at it. One moment tall, one moment crawling, one moment bending like broken branches." She shook her head slowly. I felt my mind slip, like my thoughts were falling sideways. So I slammed my eyes shut again. And then I did something it did not expect. Her expression hardened, calm, but fierce. I spoke its name. She tapped her chest twice. "You see, children, while it spent weeks learning mine, whispering it, tasting it, I had been listening too. Every sound it made, every distorted syllable, every half-breath." She breathed deeply, and in my terror, I remembered something old. Something my mother once told me. Everything that learns a name can lose to one. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp now, alive in a way they hadn't been before. So I whispered the sound back to it. Not perfectly. Nothing human can pronounce a word made of darkness, but close enough. She lowered her voice to a trembling hum. When I said it, the shadow froze. Her fingers traced the air. It recoiled, not like a wounded thing, but like something that had been discovered. She nodded once. That was the moment I understood. The creature wasn't hunting me because I was weak. It was hunting me because I was paying attention. The lantern flickered violently, and when I spoke its name again, stronger this time, it shrank back, peeling itself away from the walls, from the air, from me. Her voice rose just a little, steady and grim. I felt the room lighten, the darkness loosen, the pressure lift from my chest. She sighed, slow and long. And then, children, it fled. She sat back, letting the silence settle. It didn't scream. It didn't roar. It simply vanished, like a thought forced out of the mind. Her voice softened. I opened my eyes and the room was empty. Just me. And a cold breeze. And the first hint of dawn. A faint smile tugged at her lips. But children, don't mistake this for a victory. Creatures like that don't die. They don't disappear forever. She clasped her hands gently. They only retreat and wait. She glanced toward the window, her voice dropping to its final whisper. And sometimes in the deepest part of night, when the house is quiet enough, and the world is asleep enough, I still hear my name. Her eyes narrowed as if listening. Fainter now, but never gone. She lifted her chin slowly. So remember what I told you tonight. Your silence is a doorway. Your fear is a language. And your name is the only thing that belongs to you. She nodded once more, firmly. Guard it, always. That's how the story ends.